Hey there, nation, and welcome to the show where we help you to play miniatures wargaming on a budget. It is I, Commander Cheapskate, and we are back with another episode of Way of the Underhive. This series is dedicated to helping brand new players to Necromunda build their starting rosters and learn more about the game mechanics of their favorite gangs. And on today's episode, we will discuss playing a Slave Guild Outcast gang in your campaigns of Necromunda Ash Wastes. We will discuss the gang's strengths, their weaknesses, their fighters, their playstyle, and provide critical information that you could use to use in your very first campaign of Necromunda. At the same time, we will also provide a 1,400 point starting roster that you can use in your very first campaign. So like I mentioned in my previous videos, playing a delegation gang with the merchant guilds is actually a very viable option now that you're going out into the Ash Wastes. Not only will you have the perks of being a slaver entourage, you will also have outcast scum and champions to help you, but you also have vehicles with heavy weapons to help kind of mitigate some of the negatives that you had originally going in to the Underhive. So with that being said, let's go ahead and talk about this gang a little bit more in detail, and let's get this video on a roll. Alright, so let's talk about the strengths of actually playing an outcast delegation gang from the merchant guild. So the strengths that you have, of course, are potentially it's one of the most powerful starting gangs in a campaign to use a delegation gang. And the reason why is because a lot of these delegation gangs start off with excellent equipment and skills for almost all their fighters right from the start. So that's actually one of the nice ways about that. You can start with better weapons, better equipment, better skills, in some cases even better stats with some of your fighters than your opponents will, which gives you a really good edge at the beginning of a campaign. At the same time, you can also take advantage of the new weird disciplines that came out from the book of the Outcast, and you can actually use those weird disciplines out in the Ash Wastes as well. So that part is really cool too. Now, probably the biggest strength that's actually impacted Outcast delegation gangs the most has probably been the access to vehicles, especially vehicles with heavy weapons and special weapon options on those vehicles. Some of these delegations actually really suffered from things like lack of heavy weaponry or speed or maneuverability or whatever the case may be. So vehicles with these heavy weapons really give these delegation gangs a real advantage out in the Ash Wastes of Necromunda. So now that we're done talking about the strengths of playing a delegation gang, let's go and talk about the weaknesses. Alright, so perhaps the biggest weakness of actually playing a delegation gang that's an outcast gang is that you cannot take any alliances whatsoever. If you decide to use the delegation as the core of your gang, no alliances are available to you. So for example, if you're a merchant guild delegation gang, you can't take criminal alliances or noble house alliances, and vice versa for all the other ones as well. So that's one of the biggest weaknesses of playing a delegation gang. If you really like using alliances to help your gang out, this might not be the one for you. However though, like I said before in the strengths, it does give you a leg up in the actual beginning of a campaign because you have better fighters, better equipment, and better skills. Now, one of the weaknesses of this gang, of course, is that if you decide to play WYSIWYG, which is an acronym for what you see is what you get type of gangs, this can be quite pricey in my opinion. And the reason why is because, for example, if you were to play a Nauticon siphoning delegation, for example, as the core of your gang, and you want to buy the Forge World miniatures in order to fill that gang, those Forge World miniatures can be quite expensive. So because of that, I would suggest looking for cheaper alternatives or convert your own in most cases. A lot of these delegations have not been manufactured yet, so you could possibly do that, but that's just something you might want to take into account. Me, of course, I would never actually do that. I would just convert my own or find alternate ways to get cheaper miniatures, and that's the thing I would keep in mind when I would be playing a delegation gang. At the same time, these gangs are also very expensive to field in terms of credits. These delegations, like I said, have a lot of skills, a lot of weapons, better stats, and you're going to pay for those. For example, I think the cheapest of the delegations starts off at like 540 credits, I believe. So because of that, it's going to be very, very expensive for you to fill these fighters, but that's the way it goes. And lastly, probably the biggest weakness of actually playing an outcast delegation gang is that you do have to be aware of the balanced bandwagon. A lot of balanced bandwagon types will scream overpowered or game breaking or unfair and so on and so forth. But of course, once again, just ignore those immaturity of those players, drink the salt of their tears, and just use that to power yourself in destroying your enemies. So these are some of the strengths and weaknesses involved in playing a delegation gang. Alright, so when it comes to delegation gangs, once again, you get to pick from merchant guilds, criminal syndicates, or noble houses, and use those delegations you get from those alliances to form the core of your gang. Leaders also get archetypes and affiliations depending on what delegation you choose. Also, champions also get archetypes as well, so that allows for a lot of customization for your different members of your delegations depending on the affiliations and the archetypes that you choose. Now, once again, remember, archetypes depend on what kind of primary and secondary skills your champions and your leaders receive, while affiliations usually determine what kind of weapons and equipment you can get from the starting list, if not from the trading post as well. At the same time, the nice thing about these delegations is that the members of those delegations gain experience and they can purchase weapons and equipment over time, just like any other gang. So that part is really, really cool. And once again, I have to make sure I stress this a lot. If you decide to take a delegation outcast gang, you cannot make any alliances whatsoever in the future. So just be aware when that actually happens and keep that in mind. Alright, so the last thing we're going to do real quick is talk about which specific merchant guilds you can actually take delegations for in order to create your outcast gang. So there are 5 delegations from the merchant guilds that you can actually use to make your core of your gang. If you'll notice, the Guild of Iron is not on here, and the reason why is because the Guild of Iron consists of D3 plus 2 Hive Scum, so they really didn't have any unique delegations for them. However, from the list that you can choose from, you can either choose the Pyromantic Conclave to be the core of your gang, you could use the Nautican Siphoning Delegation to be the core of your gang, you could use the Slaver Entourage from the Slavers Guild, the Corpse Harvesting Party from the Corpse Guild, or the Toll Collectors from the Guild of Coin. And depending on which of these delegations you choose will form the core of your gang, as well as what skills and weapons and equipment they have. Now it should be mentioned that whatever war gear, equipment, and weapons that these delegations have, you can also use those items to outfit your outcast champions as well as your Hive Scum with those same weapons as well. So if you can't get things normally from the trading post or from the starting lists, you can get it from there because purpose of the fact that your delegation can share those materials with the rest of your gang as well. So now that we're done talking about the delegation gangs as well as the merchant guild delegations you can choose from, let's go ahead and talk about your specific merchant guild on the next slide. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the Slaver Entourage. The Slaver Entourage costs you 710 credits, and to be perfectly honest, it is one of the strongest and toughest of the guild delegations that are available to a player. And there's a reason why this was actually the #1 chosen guild alliance to make in games of Necromunda back when they were in the Underhive. And the reason why is because this entourage is kitted out for one thing and one thing only, which is brutal close quarters combat. They do have some access to powerful weapons equipment. They do have access to chain glaives, so now you can get that for your gang, for your outcast gang. Same thing with chain axes, shock whips, bio boosters for additional bonuses against injuries, Stimm-Slug stashes to beef up your fighters. You can also purchase light Carapace armor for your fighters, shock staves, as well as harpoon launchers. So you do have some really good access to some really good weapons that you can give to your cheaper Hive Scum and actually maximize using those weapons in your battles. At the same time, making those cheap spam melee spam fighters with these powerful weapons is going to allow you to swarm the opposition and to really bring the pain. For example, all of your Hive Scum actually start at 3 credits, so giving them something like a chain glaive is actually a viable option, or a chain axe, or shock whips, or whatever you want to do to make these guys extremely deadly. And that's one of the big perks of taking a Slaver Entourage is the access to all the excellent equipment, not to mention the excellent fighters that you get to bring in with you as well. So now that we're done talking about the entourage as a whole, let's go and talk about the individual fighters that make up the Slave Guild's entourage. Alright, so right off the bat, we're going to talk about the Chain Lord, and the Chain Lord will be the leader of your gang as well. This fighter's got a 4 instrument allowance, they have 3+ weapon skills, 6+ for ballistic skill, they have 4 strength, 4 toughness, 2 wounds, they have 4+ for initiative, 2 attacks, as well as 7+ for leadership, 6+ for cool, 7+ for willpower, as well as 9+ for leadership. Now the Chain Lord, like I said before, would be the leader of your gang as well, and I would recommend giving them the Survivor archetype. And the reason why is because a lot of the skills and equipment this fighter already comes with is going to make them really brutal in close combat, so they really don't need anything else beyond that because they're already pretty much kitted out to slaughter your oppositions anyways. What you are going to worry about though is that your enemies are going to know this, so they're going to put all their firepower directly onto this guy to try to kill him. So you're going to need Nerves of Steel, because what Nerves of Steel allows you to do is it allows you to escape pinning as long as you take a cool test. And this guy does have a pretty good cool stat, so you can reliably get out of pinning all the time with this character. Trust me, this guy's going to become a bullet sponge as your campaign develops. Now when you pick your fighter, you have 1 or 2 options when it comes to equipment. You can either go with just a chain glaive, or you can go with a chain axe and a shock whip. I always suggest that you go with a chain axe and a shock whip for a couple of reasons. 1, the chain axe is a really brutal close combat weapon just by itself. 2, the shock whip has the versatile trait which can let you really take good advantage of the ride-by rules, and at the same time keep you at bay and you can actually attack your opponents at distance without charging them in. And 3, if you do charge in your character, they also get additional attack and hand combat. Chain glaive, it's just 1 single weapon. Yes, it does have the versatile trait, which is kind of nice, but it actually has a minus penalty for actually hitting people using that versatile trait, so there you go. That's the reason why I recommend the chain axe and the shock whip. Plus you also got parry with the chain axe too, which is also really good. Now, like I said before, you get versatile attacks with the shock attack for your shock whip, plus you get one more plus attack in close combat. Always a good idea to go with that. Now, this guy does come with some pretty powerful equipment. They come with a light Carapace armor, so that we have a 4-up armor save. They have a bio booster, so that way they can re-roll injury dice, and they do have a Stimm-Slug stash for durability as well as buffs and close combat. Now, this fighter does come with the Overseer skill as well as Hurl. However, even though a lot of the guild characters do come with Overseer skill and they use those most of the time in my builds, you're really not going to use Overseer all that often with the Chain Lord. I mean, you can if you need to, but for most of the time though, you're probably not going to worry about that because you're going to want this guy committed into combat because he is an absolute beast, and that's where he actually wants to operate from. My suggestion to you, if you decide to use Overseer, the only time you're using it is because you're trying to shoot, make someone you're getting shoot at distance and you're still closing the enemy distance to your enemy so that way you can engage him in close combat. And that makes up what I like to call the Chain Lord. Alright, the next person we're going to talk about real quick is the Shackleman. This character's got a 4-inch wound allowance as well as a 4-up weapon skill, a 5+ ballista skill, so not that great. But they have 3 strength, 3 toughness, they also have 2 wounds, they have 4 initiative, 1 attack, they have 8+ for leadership, 7+ for cool, 7+ for willpower, as well as 8+ intelligence. Now, when it comes to the Shackleman, I suggest you go with the Gunslinger archetype for this build, and you take the fast shot ability with the Harpoon launcher. Now, the reason why that is the case is because you'll be able to fire the Harpoon launcher twice. Now, when you use the Harpoon launcher, and yes, you can fire it twice, because even though it is a heavy weapon, it doesn't have the unwieldy trait, so yes, you can fire it twice. And the reason why you got to do that is because when you do that, you want to make sure that you're within the short range distance, so that way you get that additional bonus to hit with your firing of your Harpoon launcher as well. So that's why. At the same time, when it comes to this guy's equipment, this guy does come Flak armor for the 6+ armor save. They also have a shock stave, so they use that in close combat with their Harpoon launcher as well as a cult icon. The cult icon is nice because you can do larger group activations with your Shackleman activating your 2 pit fighters. And like I said before, fast shots could be nice to have with your Harpoon launcher because you can fire it twice. And like I said before, you can, because the Harpoon launcher is not unwieldy, so you can fire that weapon twice. Now, my suggestion to you, of course, is to get a mono sight for your Harpoon launcher as quickly as possible. So if you do have to go with the longer ranges and you need to aim to fire, you get that +2 to your ballista skill, which is going to be nice as well. At the same time, this guy makes an excellent heavy weapon support fighter. He's also decent in close combat too, but you really want to use that Harpoon launcher at short range just to be able to impale and drag fools off of vehicles when you get the chance. Alright, and lastly, we're going to talk about your pit slaves. These are going to be 2 of your gangers in your list. The pit fighter has a movement characteristic of 5 inches. They have a 4+ weapon skill, 6+ ballista skill. They have 3 strength, 3 toughness, as well as 1 wound. They have 4 initiative, 2 attacks. They have 8 leadership, 7 cool, 8 willpower, as well as 10 intelligence. So when it comes to this pit slaves, these 2 guys will be 2 gangers in your list. These 2 fighters are armored chain glaives, as well as flak armor, as well as Stimm-Slug stashes. And this is actually kind of good. And the reason why is because the chain glaive, like I said, does have that versatile trait on it, so you can attack at distance. You throw that Stimm-Slug stash on top of them, their stats are going to get increased as well, and they cause all kinds of problems up for your opponent. So they also get rain of blows. And rain of blows is kind of nice too because you don't necessarily need to charge in a combat to do fight actions because those fight actions can be considered simple actions. And since you got that versatile trait for your chain glaives, you can use that against your opponents at distance, which is really nice. Or you could take advantage of the ride-by rule and use it on your enemy as you're driving past them, which would be kind of nice too. And so that makes it really, really deadly as well. Now, another thing, the reason why these pit slaves are so deadly is because of Overseer. If you have your Chain Lord who spams Overseer on one of your pit slaves, these guys can make 4 separate attacks to spam the ride-by rules or in close combat. So either one of those is perfectly fine, especially if they charge in close combat. They get additional attack on top of that, which gives them 6 attacks total. So like I said, very, very deadly combination. Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the Underhive Outcast Champion real quick. For these gangs, these guys cost 60 credits apiece, and for their stats, they have 5-inch movement, 3+ weapon skill, 4+ ballista skill. They have 3 strength, 3 toughness. They also have 2 wounds, they have 4 initiative, 1 attack. They have 6 leadership, 7 cool, 8 willpower, as well as 8 intelligence. So let's go on and talk about these guys real quick. So when it comes to the Underhive Outcast Champions, they're very versatile, and the reason why is because their stats are pretty much mediocre. Now that's both a good and a bad thing. While it might be bad because they can't excel at any one given thing, whether it's shooting or close combat, it does allow them to be able to equip a large variety of weapons and fulfill any role that you need them to fulfill within your gang as well. Now when it also comes to your guys' Underhive Outcast Champions, archetypes of course are very, very important. But the problem with these guys though is that their archetypes are very limited for their skills, in my opinion. For example, they have 5 different archetypes they can choose from, but they only have 1 primary skill, and each of those archetypes followed by 2 secondaries. So for example, if you were to take the Brawler archetype, Brawn would be your primary with Ferocity and Leadership as your secondaries. If you were a Gunslinger archetype, Shooting would be your primary with Agility as well as Leadership as your secondaries. For a Survivor archetype, Ferocity would be your primary, followed by Combat and Leadership for your secondaries. For Mastermind, Cunning would be your primary, with Leadership and Savant as your secondaries. And of course, for weird archetypes, your Psychic Disciplines would be your primary, followed by Cunning and Leadership as your secondaries. Unfortunately for the champion, there are no archetypes where combat is a primary, so that is kind of limiting on what you can do. So you won't be getting any skills really to increase your combat abilities, but better weapons and equipment choices could probably help out with that as well. Now when it comes to their equipment and weapons, they can purchase pretty much anything they want to off the trading post, so long as it's within the rarity value of 8 on the trading post. So they are kind of limited in some of their choices, but the reason why that is the case is because you can take 1 champion for every 3 Hive Scum in your gang. So for example, if you have 6 Hive Scum in your gang, you can take 2 champions. If you got 9 Hive Scum, you can get 3 champions, and etc. So that's basically where the trade-off kind of comes in. And then finally, of course, we have our Underhive Outcast Hive Scum, which is your typical Ganger and Juvie level fighter for your gang. These guys cost 30 credits apiece. For their stats, they have 5-inch movement, 4+ weapon skill and ballistic skill, 3 strength and toughness. They have 1 wound, 4+ for initiative, 1 attack. They have 8+ for leadership, cool, willpower, and intelligence. And for their skill access, when they become a specialist, their primary is cunning, with ferocity as their secondary. Now, Underhive Scum, Outcast Scum, they're very mediocre, okay? But because of that, they're also very cheap to field. And even though they have very mediocre stats, they count as both gangers and Juvie level fighters for your gang, and because their stats are still so mediocre, they can fulfill many different roles in your gang. You can equip them as shooters, close combat, you can use them as support, you can use them as suicide bombers, especially now that you can also put them on Waster dirt bikes. They make great pursuers on Waster dirt bikes, for example. So there's a variety of things you can do with these guys to fulfill pretty much any role that you want to. And plus, if you decide to make it into a delegation gang, you can also take better weapons equipment from the delegation lists as well. So that's another cool thing about Outcast Hive Scum as well. Now, unfortunately, you cannot start your campaign with an Outcast specialist, so that part is kind of sad. Almost every single gang can have a specialist except for Outcast, so that part is kind of sad. But that's the kind of the trade-off. Yes, you can't get those specialists, but right at the start. But you have so many guys you can choose from, and plus your delegations can fulfill those roles anyways, so it's not that big of an issue. So that makes up your guys' Outcast Hive Scum. Alright, so now that we're done talking about the Outcast Scum as well as the Outcast Champions, let's talk about your army list. I call this the Citadel Slaver Entourage gang worth 1,400 points. If you wonder why I call them the Citadel, it's because I'm naming them after Morton Joe's guys from Mad Max Fury Road. So first of all, you have your Chain Lords, which cost you 280 credits. This guy's got the Survivor archetype as well as light Carapace armor. They have a Chain Axe, a Shock Whip, as well as Bio Booster. They also have a Stimm-Slug stash. They have the Overseer skill as well as Hurl, and you're going to give them the Nerves of Steel skill because of their Survivor archetype, because like I said before, they get shot at quite a bit. After that, you have a Shackleman. It's going to cost you 195 credits. This guy's got the Gunslinger archetype. This person's carrying Flak armor as well as a Harpoon launcher. They're also giving him a Stubgun as well for additional attack and close combat, as well as a Shock Stave. You give them the Cult Icon as well as the Fast Shot ability as well. And then after that, you got your first Outcast Champion. This fighter's cost you 270 credits. This guy's got the Gunslinger archetype as well. They're packing Mesh armor as well as a Web Gun, so that we got that Strength 5 Strength 5 template weapon. You have a Stubgun and Shock Stave for close combat, as well as another Cult Icon, so this guy can do larger group activations, and the Fast Shot ability, so that way they can fire twice with that Web Gun at their enemies. Very, very deadly combination, and narratively also fits this group pretty well because you want to take your victims alive in most cases. After that, you have your 2 Pit Slaves. Pit Slaves number 1 and 2 both cost you 120 credits apiece. Both will have Flak armor, Chain Glaives, Stimm-Slug stashes, as well as Rain of Blows. Then after that, you will have 2 Outcast Scum. Outcast Scum number 1 and 2. They both cost you 65 credits apiece. Both of them are armed with reclaimed autoguns and telescopic sights. So that way they can get those bonuses to aim, and also provide some medium to close range shooting for your gang. And lastly, you're going to hire a Scum Racer for 285 credits. This fighter's got the Walker custom vehicle. It's got a Harpoon launcher for heavy weapon, as well as a transport bed to transport your fighters. You have extra armor to add +1 to the toughness of the hull, as well as smoke vents, so that way enemies suffer a -1 hit against you in shooting. Nitro burners for that +1 movement allowance, as well as a boarding ramp, so that way you get +1 initiative to all your fighters when they board your enemy vehicle. And this is the list I like to call the Citadel Slaver Entourage gang for 1,400 credits. So let's talk about what this gang is designed to do with the gang overview. So this gang is a close quarters battle monster. That's exactly what these guys are designed to do. Your objective with this gang is to close the distance, board enemy vehicles if you need to, and swarm your enemies. The Scum Racer makes sure you get to grips with your enemies. The Walker has a movement 6 because you got that the Mitro Burners. They have -1 hit against you because of smoke vents, and they also have a toughness 4. So it's going to be kind of nice. That boarding ramp is going to assist with boarding actions, and the Harpoon launcher can fire twice using the chain launch oversteer ability while out of combat range of the enemy. Now the gang consists of 2 fire teams, which consists of 1 support fire team and 1 assault fire team. Your support fire team consists of your Shackleman, Outcast Scum number 1 and 2, as well as the Scum Racer. The Scum Racer moves as quickly as possible to get the gang into combat with the enemy, and the Scum Racer and Shackleman uses their Harpoon launcher to suppress the enemy. You can also fire 3 Strength 5, -3 AP, 1 damage attack with Impale and Drag every turn with these guys. So that's the reason why these guys are the support fire team. Meanwhile, Outcast Scum number 1 and 2 provide for suppressing fire with their auto guns. They need to do basic actions to get their +1 to hit, +2 to hit at long range. They'll get 1 from their telescopic sight as well as 1 to aim, so make sure you do that. Now your assault fire team consists of your Chain Lord, your Outcast Champion, as well as Pit Slave number 1 and Pit Slave number 2. This fire team conducts boarding actions upon enemy vehicles or fights dismounted. The Chain Lord and the Pit Slaves will absolutely kill in close combat. That's exactly what they're designed to do. And you won't be using the Chain Lord's oversteer ability too much because you'll be primarily focusing on fighting. Now the Champion does have the fast shot ability, which means they're going to fire the web gun twice per activation or 4 times if under the oversteer ability. And because he's webbed these people off, your Chain Lord as well as your Pit Slaves can finish off your enemies with coup de grace and also earn experience points for themselves at the same time. And that's how you go about playing what I like to call the Citadel Slaver Entourage list. So in conclusion, playing a Merchant Guild Delegation Outcast gang is some of the great ways to add a lot of variety and diversity within a Necromunda campaign. That was actually one of the cool things that came out with the Book of the Outlands, that you got to see so many new gangs to be able to field into campaigns and keep things fresh, keep things interesting, and show a lot of cool different options you can actually do to make the world of Necromunda really, really awesome. At the same time, by playing a Merchant Guild Delegation gang, you do have a lot of powerful options, and when you throw in vehicles and the equipment and weapons that it can take, you could even make your gang even more powerful as the campaign goes on. So in my opinion, pick your favorite guild, get yourself your very vehicles, whatever flavor you want to, head out to the Ashways and start to tame them for the name of your Merchant Guild and the name of Pride and Profit. Now, of course, as always, just watch out for the saltiness of the Balance Bandwagon. They're going to have a huge field day with this, screaming out grieving and overpowered and game-breaking mechanics and all that kind of stuff. But just remember when you defeat them and they start crying about it, to enjoy those tears and use it to warm your soul. So that's good to do for those of you guys. As always, please feel free to like, comment, and or subscribe. Your guys' input is valuable to us as always. Also check us out on Facebook, Instagram, as well as blogger.com for all the latest greatest hobby news related to this channel. That's good to do for this one, you guys. We will catch you guys on the next one. Peace out and stay classy.